At what point do you think like Wick and the ownership actually consider that that might be the future of this organization? Was it like Danny starts to hint like, okay, I'm kind of wearing down. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And then they're like, shit, what are we going to do? Like, oh, we kind of, because my feeling is that they felt that they needed a change at head coach, right? Like,
Yeah.
even though they had just signed Brad to that extension, after the way the season went, and the way that Brad was feeling too, probably, but like, I think ownership wanted a head coach, and maybe it was somewhat convenient and helpful, to not have to pay a bunch of money to Brad if you're going to part ways with him after you're just signed him to the extension. You have this opening. Do you think there's anything to that it just might have been, I don't know, like a perfect storm of kind of saving face and kind of simplifying the whole transition process?
I definitely think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, anybody around the NBA you talked to around that time, the consensus was this doesn't happen overnight. And then I talked to someone who, I trust, who talked to Brad right after the bubble. And, I think Woj was the first to kind of report this. Like, Brad definitely was telling people openly he was burnt out from the grind. And I think, the more I get deeper into the league, the more it seems pretty apparent that the NBA is a mess, and every single organization has infighting and people with conflicting agendas, and people who are trying to push themselves forward in this whole basketball world, whether that be monetarily, whether that be legacy wise, whatever. And being the head coach in that environment, while it's a great job for a lot of people, it's also one of the more taxing and one of the more thankless ones too. Like, when you're Nate McMillan and you come in and you save the franchise, you gain a lot of power. Same with Tom Thibodeau in New York. But if you're a head coach who is holding the reins of a team that falls below expectations, you can get fired as the scapegoat pretty easily, right? And players come to you and complain to you about their minutes or whatever. Like, I think that is not what's happening in college. When you're this global kind of name at a little dinky school like Butler, no offense to Butler, like, you're kind of the guy who everyone comes to you. You got to make sure coach is all right. Is coach happy? Blah, 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 blah. And I think, after years of going through the Kyrie, Al Horford, Gordon Hayward stuff, mixing in with, they had a cute little rebuild building for a while. All of a sudden the switch flipped and they were in this contending mode with mercurial guys like we just mentioned and expectations. And I think all that kind of did blend to the perfect storm, like I mentioned, where he's got this big deal now. Definitely. I mean, I don't know definitively why Danny wanted to part ways, but it seemed like there was mutual interest on all parties for him to take a step back and a step out, and Brad not wanting to necessarily be. I mean, I think it was kind of communicated to me that everyone involved with Boston kind of understood and wanted Brad to still stick around, but not in that role. And where is he going to go besides taking, he's being paid that much money, and he is so respected for his basketball mind by ownership. It seemed to be just like there is the only one place for him to move, which is taking over Danny's spot.
It is. It's just a wild change of events in terms of where this team was at even a year ago. I mean, like, obviously the Kyrie situation was what it was, but then, they were maybe a Gordon and Hayward ankle injury away from the NBA Finals a year ago. And now for, everything for this season was not a true disaster for a franchise, but like the free agent signings obviously did not work out. I think Brad was clearly frustrated.
Jeff Teague's an NBA champion.
Jeff Teague's an NBA champion. We know that. So, I mean, everything worked. They gave away Jeff Teague. We say what happened to him. They gave away Tice just to get out of the tax. So it's like the Hayward situation. I think everyone knows that was not, probably managed the way they wanted in terms of the signals that he was probably going to be out the door, but they were acting like they could have a chance of re-signing him to the end. So you wonder how much all that factored into Brad's frustration this year. And like that, if he was already burnt out at the end of the bubble, like he had talked about, what this past year for him must have clearly sent him over the edge. But then it makes you wonder, Jake, too, like, then you hear all the Indiana basketball buzz during the year too, that he had to address that. Obviously there was some, real smoke there, it seemed like, for a little bit until he eventually, cut down. But that, probably happened around the same time this all maybe started to turnover happen within the organization. So it is the inside story of all that. I'm sure we're going to hear more about it in the years to come, but it is that chain of events seems to be really fascinating.
Yeah, just like you said, I don't have it definitively, but I would suspect that the Indiana stuff is right along when these contracts, what are we going to do here?
And then what's going to happen? We talked about after the draft, right? Everyone's saying after the draft. And then you have Danny's homies, right? That you mentioned, who are working hard, working on this. And then is it like, hey, you just helped us through this offseason and potentially parting ways? Or is it just like, is it that, like, Austin, thanks, Dave, thanks?
Yeah, it could be. Like, the NBA's can be ruthless and cutthroat. Like Portland, when they let go of Terry, they brought in all the coaching staff one day into a conference room and just said, you're all gone. And that's happened in, a lot of situations where, an executive comes in, they go through the draft, and they just fire everybody after the draft. Like Minnesota did that. Gerson Rosas, when he took over, it's possible. I don't know. There's so much conflicting hearsay about Austin and Zarin and Dave, which I'm sure that they're on one name basis with all your listeners, with how, parochial, the Boston sports scene is. But, there's definite rumblings that there'll be changes, and that a lot of those guys, maybe all of them, maybe some of them, might not be there moving forward, which would be, of course, a pretty drastic swap from the way things have run there since I think Danny got hired in 2003. Yep. So it's there could be some more changes definitely happening to the fabric of that organization, I think, in the next couple months or so. Definitely.
Hi guys, Cedric Maxwell here. I want to take a minute to tell you about Marigold Medical. I'm used to keeping my body in great shape, but with arthritis, even the most simple everyday tasks became unbearable. As soon as I called Marigold Medical, I knew I was in good hands. No drugs, no surgery, just an experienced team of caring professionals that wanted to get me back to doing the things I love. Make the call to Marigold Medical and get back to pain-free life.